Hello, and welcome to the Be Purely Balanced podcast. I'm Dr. Crystal Couture, and today I'm here with Damla, Aktekin, and we are talking about healing the wounds within. Damla is a healer who helps people with energetic wounds to update their vibration, reclaim their light, and replace their burdens with joy, love, and bliss. She's also a 500-hour certified yoga teacher and Reiki master, and has over 1,000 hours of healing, movement, meditation, and workshop teaching in her experience. She's a creator of a website and blog called The Drop of Om, Chakra Bliss Healing Private Sessions, Chakra Bliss Group Healing Sessions, and Mantra Dance Workshops. She's the mom of an awesome, funny, and curly 6-year-old daughter. Her life oscillates between playing ponies with her daughter and teaching and creating bliss-filled healing, movement, and meditation journeys. Good morning, Damla.
Good morning.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's fun. I'm excited to chat with you.
Beautiful. I'm really excited to see how playing with your daughter, being with your daughter works into the aspect of healing. But before we get into that, let's learn a little bit about you and your own sacred healing journey.
Yes. Well, she's pretty much my healer. That's how all this started in 2012. I mean, I've been always interested in healing in one way or another, but I didn't realize how much I needed it before she came along. And she came along with force, with a lot of fierceness, and with a lot of sleeplessness on my end, which was the catalyzer for me to bring out to the surface everything that I hadn't healed.
Okay.
Like in full force. So then, and I'm deeply grateful to her on a soul level, because up until that point, I hadn't even realized that I had wounds. I mean, certain things, yes, you know, and know as, you know, not so shiny points in your life, but I hadn't realized the load I had been carrying. Like I would go into these unexplainable boats of anger or sometimes sadness, and I wouldn't necessarily have a point of origin pinpointed to it until I started to work on this field of, you know, recognizing and unfolding energetic wounds. And now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, of course I should have been angry. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then how do you be with that? I mean, yoga was a catalyzer for me too. That whole journey of beginning to notice and understand that I have a body,
Yes.
that I don't exist in my head or in my intellectual capacity. Like there are things that I feel and sense and carry in my body. And then through the journey of motherhood, it was this need for having this light being in my life. And there's no other way but healing. There's no other way but choosing to heal. And at that point, I turned into the stuff I knew, which was I knew somewhat about mantras. That was my first entry point. And then I had a preliminary understanding of chakras, which since then continues to deepen. So with that understanding, I started to experiment with crystals, and that's how the chakra bliss healing was born. But overall, it was a journey of how can I be with this?
Yeah.
How can I make my container slightly more expanded to be able to hold this and to transform that which I'm carrying. So yeah, that's the work for me and everyone else that I work with, and I feel like everyone else in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that it was while you were pregnant that you started to have this awareness to the emotions and the unruliness of the emotions. And of course, during pregnancy, right, there's a wide range of hormones, but it seems like that was enough to give you insight as to what was going on and for you to say, hey,
it wasn't, I mean, I had the most blissful pregnancy imaginable.
mm-hmm.
I was chanting, I was glowing. It was more, I had also an expectation of what birth and aftermath would look like.
Okay.
Which didn't fit reality. So it was more the fall from, oh my god, the bliss, the glow, and it was like down to the depths of the valley of, all right, now I'm responsible for this human being. I have like -0 time for myself. Yeah. And all of this is coming up in my relationship that I haven't looked at, and in me that I haven't looked at. And yeah, it was in the rumble, and it was in the beautiful chaos is how I want to call it, although it didn't quite feel that way.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So still a time after the birth, still a time when the hormones are kind of, activated, but yet it caused you to have this awareness. It caused you to tune in and say, where am I at? What's happening? And it sounds like you had some modalities already under your belt. You had like some tools in your toolkit. But what was the most striking aspect? What was the part that helped you to really turn it around and say, okay, now I can be with myself. I can be with these emotions and, sort of move forward with greater understanding of myself and what I'm needing?
Yeah, it was, I hit rock bottom. It was, I felt myself like falling into a deep, deep hole. And it wasn't so much, let me go into myself, explore. It was more like, I need to survive. I need to survive this by any means necessary, because this person that I have in my hand needs me and I need me.
Yeah.
And it was I remember this moment, I'm in the shower, and like I could feel myself like getting to a really, really dark place. And I turned on the mantra music, and I could feel just like a little bit of uplift, just, a tiny bit of relief almost. And it was at that moment, it was like, I could either, if I'm a rock, I could either let myself like fall deeper and deeper down into this valley of darkness, or I can like pick up the pieces and like pick it up, like grab whatever little pieces of light that I can grab and move from there. And it was gradual.
Yeah.
And then came the crystals, and then I mean, after it was this gradual, I would sit with my crystals, and I would get, despite my sleep, I would wake up from like a 15-minute meditation, and I would be like, oh wow, like I feel a little better. And then it was like, I got more curious about it, and I was like, what else is possible? What else is possible? What else could I look into and feel and be with? And another thing that came out of this was, throughout my pregnancy, I had a heightened intuition. I think I've always had that, but I hadn't tuned into it. Like if I'm walking down the street, I would feel almost the vibration of another person coming towards me. And then I had, I chose to not listen to my intuition throughout my birth experience, which is another story. But then after birth, it was like, I cannot ignore it anymore. These feelings, like all of these. And then it became almost enjoyable, to the sense that I surrendered to it. Yeah. Like all of my life, living in my headspace. And I studied engineering. I have an MBA. I worked in the corporate world. It was all in my headspace. And now I'm finding myself in a place where my intuition is the only thing that can get me out. And that's what I followed.
Wow. So I think there's something in this for our listeners, for anyone who's with us today, right? Is this idea of being unable to ignore that intuition, that inner voice, whatever people call it, that inner voice, inner wisdom, whatever it is, the gut, however they perceive it, not being able to ignore that anymore and surrendering to what that inner guidance system is offering us.
Yes. We can also experiment and play with it.
Yeah.
So it could be that you're not quite ready to surrender fully when it comes to bigger life decisions, but you could surrender as you're walking down the aisles of your grocery store to choose what you need.
Right.
You could surrender to, this music popping into your head, and perhaps that reminds you of a time and a place that needs healing in your life. Or you could surrender to the words of that piece of music and let it be a message for you for that day.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways. But for me, it was like, I guess one thing I would like to convey to anyone listening is that it's there, whether you realize it or not. And you don't have to come to that fork of, I have to listen to it now. You can perhaps take some steps before or even during and be like, okay, like I'm listening now. I'm open to listen in whatever small way that I can today.
That's a great point. I have this tendency to kind of go all in, which works for me, but it doesn't always work for everybody. So I think there are ways in which we can, really take it step by step and really break it up into the spaces when we can listen, when we can surrender. And even if that's as simple, like you said, as hearing the music and letting the music.
Yes.
Love that. Love it. So tell us a little bit more about your healing modalities. We know that you work with the chakras. You've created this chakra bliss. So tell us more about crystals, the tuning forks, the chakras, all that good stuff that you bring into your practice every day.
Yes. My favorite toys, you mean? So it's I work with crystals and with tuning forks. I also work with a modality called emotional freedom technique. I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar. It's tapping. But all of those are under the umbrella of healing what I call energetic wounds.
Yes.
And energetic wounds are all that which we live through and all the little remnants of stories, experiences, emotions, and sensations that we haven't been able to quite resolve. So energetic wounds are the stuck places where we're perhaps holding on to that anger that we're not quite sure where it comes from. Or we're holding on to that resentment or the hurt. Or there's this deep sadness which has always been there. We're not quite sure where it comes from. So there's a daily aspect of it. So you might go into an argument with someone and afterwards you might feel like misunderstood, disappointed, or so there might be a need for you to sit down with yourself and sort of clear your day. And that's a need. So I call that sort of self-healing, daily maintenance. That's your meditation, that's your yoga, whatever it is. But what I'm talking about is a little deeper than that. And one example I can give is lately what's coming up in some of my private sessions is this concept, or I mean, rather a live reality of embodying our parents or our ancestors' pain as a way to honor them.
Yes.
Okay. So imagine this, imagine this mother in your life who has anger issues, and it's you don't realize that you are acting like her.
Mm-hmm.
But you are.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that this is a misconceived way of loving her.
Yeah.
And it's painful for everyone, because in your loving her, you're not loving yourself, and you're not allowing the space for people to be loving to you, which was your mom's problem to begin with.
There's something big here. And this is something I've actually been waiting for it to come up on the podcast. So this is awesome. This is just what I've been waiting for. The way you said this was so beautiful. The idea of honoring our parents and ancestors, embodying our parents and ancestors' pain in a way to honor them and love them, right? So there's a huge disconnect there. Huge, because as you said, we are not honoring ourselves. We're not embodying our own soul. We're taking this train of souls in some cases, right? Or this one other soul, and sort of allowing that to have this big, big, big voice within our being, our vessel, right?
Yeah. Which is, I mean, if you think about it, how big is that? You know, how big is that? And then if you think about the possibility of, if you could potentially be open to perhaps allowing that pain to dissolve, how much of a service is that to you and everyone around you?
Right.
And it's complicated, right? And it's different for everyone. The pains we carry are different. They show up as different things in our bodies, in our systems. But then it comes down to noticing that daily maintenance becomes important, because then you begin to notice, okay, what's a repeating theme in my emotional life, in my physical life as physical dis-ease, or in my relationships, like what keeps coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that the other day I was eating chips. and I don't feel so great after I eat them. But it's that moment where, like, I don't even think, I'm like, I need this. Yeah. Give me. And then I realized it's not even that I was hungry. It's not even that I needed them, but there's something there, right? There's something in play there for me to explore. Mm-hmm. Because I'm doing a seemingly unconscious reaching off something that's not good for me. So, and when I stop and be with that for a moment, I begin to realize, or I have had some flashes of my mom's relationship with food. And I begin to notice, like, or imagine how my grandmother related to food, or how my ancestors, because it was more of a survival thing, right? So if you're in fear, you need to survive, so you need to eat. And and I'm oversimplifying it. There was a lot there was some sadness in there. There was some anger mixed in, there was a lot of things. And that to me has become not necessarily joyful, but interesting.
Yeah. Well, it can be simple though. It's that simple awareness to a pattern, right? It's like simply you just tuned in, like what's going on? What am I doing here? And then what else is there? And you just kind of wait. It sounds like you just kind of waited for the bits to flow in, and they're still flowing in. But there's so much that we can take from that. And there's so much that we can take from this idea that you mentioned of releasing and letting go of these patterns that really don't belong to us, these patterns that aren't our own soul's manifestation in this lifetime.
Yes, which I think is a good point to talk about self-healing.
Yeah.
And what that means, because in the way I look at it, it's more for you to be able to see the pattern. So all the self-healing you do, all the salt baths you go into, the crystals you sleep with, like whatever it is that you do in your own space of healing that you feel like is meaningful for you, it's all in some way a preparation. Okay. Yes, there are ways to go deeper. You can do some of it yourself. Yeah. But then it's like a twisted snake. Sometimes it's hard for you to see your own tail.
Yes.
So then you need someone like you, Crystal, or someone like me, or whoever is within your realm of possibilities that you trust, to sit down with you and help you see your whole self, your whole beautiful, twisted, sometimes chaotic self, and make those connections, or help you make those connections that maybe you haven't made yet. Yeah. That make all the difference. To carry the burden of something like anger, something like sadness your whole life, and not realize that you were carrying some of that for your parents. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge burden. So what if you could realize you're actually being of service to them, if you can even let go of that a little bit? But again, the self-healing becomes, it makes the actual healing work possible.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's often as well that the opposite occurs. Sometimes people come in and they expect the work to just happen on the table, right? Or within the constraints of being with the healer, but it has to go both ways. Your own self-healing is super, super powerful. And yet sometimes you can't see. And so you reach out and you have that support network. And then that's the work of consciousness. That's the work of the collective, right? When we're coming together, when we're in a space where we can just be facilitating the highest and best, and then facilitate that within our own self, is just, that's amazing. Like, that's what we're here for. Why else do we have a physical body, right?
Yes. And I think you were talking about this, Crystal, this idea of the healer cannot be your everything.
Yes, exactly.
Type of thing. But then there's an alchemy that happens when you are with that person that you trust, that can hold space for you. It's almost like it's always already been decided what's going to happen. And the healer is there for you. And then you go on. The whole point is for you to go on to your whole own journey, take inspired action, be aware. And then when you realize like there's another snake coming from underneath the surface that's kind of huge for me to be with by myself, then you get some help and then you come back. Yeah, it's a beautiful dance in that way.
Yeah, that's what life is. It's these continuous flows of ups and downs, of lights and darks, and old stuff and new stuff coming together. We're constantly in a state of dichotomies, and being the center of those dichotomies. That's, I guess, humanism. That's humanity.
Yes. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the daily maintenance, and then getting some help when you need it. And help meaning help me see me.
Yeah.
Like help be a mirror for me. And that's all there is. The ancestors part is interesting though, because if you look back one generation, if you look at the lives of your parents, they had almost none of the tools that we have right now. Internet wasn't as widespread as it is. This work that we do, the healing work, I don't think it was always there, but it was for the seekers or the people who had a certain interest or whatever. Yeah. So there are all these tools available to us. And if you go back even one more generation, their lives were completely different.
Yeah.
They lived in a different world. And when I say, when we embody our parents' pain and suffering as a way to honor them, I'm still, interested in honoring them as they were, honoring the strategies that they had, because that's all they had. However lacking or however incomplete that may have been. So in the work of like seeing the pain and connecting the dots, there is no shaming or blaming. It's more seeing and recognizing, and then saying, like, I can choose a different strategy.
Yeah. I have this idea that I'm curious to chat about. So as we're talking, we're kind of going back to the past and looking at these layers that are within us, right? There could be multiple layers of ancestry. But then I think about all of these, let's just use the word, the catch-all, new age moms like yourself that come in that I see on a regular basis. So is you, right? And they're doing their healing work. They're in their space and they've got these beautiful, super tuned in little kiddos. And I'm so curious what this is all going to look like. What, when they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, like we are now, what they're going to be having conversations about, what their world is going to be like.
Yeah. I can tell you what it looks like right now.
Yeah, I love you too.
So my daughter is 6. So I've been teaching a group of 5 to 8-year-olds meditation.
I love it.
And we play with crystals. We play with imagining rainbows in our bodies. And then 2 weeks ago, we did a thankfulness meditation. Mm-hmm. I asked them, we started with, saying thank you to all the things they love. And then we moved on to, all the things we don't think about, but that exist in our lives. Things like clothing, like food that you don't think about, or the people in your life, but saying thank you to them. And then I asked them, what in your life is difficult? And what do you find to be thankful for when things are difficult? And this little girl said, I think of the stars and the moon when I have something difficult going on. 6 years old. So that's what we're dealing with in this new age. Isn't that beautiful? Stars and the moon.
I have chills. Yeah. I know it from the kids that I'm seeing too. They're so tapped in. They're so aware of the healing. They're so aware of being healers themselves already. And so many moms are saying, my little one came in to this world because I needed the healing. Or
our job is to be the guardians of that.
Yeah. So for parents that are listening that may not know exactly what we're talking about, because some are going to be like, yes, I got it. I know. This is the best reassurance, right? And others are going to be like, huh, what is this about? Can we be a little bit more clear? What's
Okay.
happening? What's changing? What's happening with these kids? What do we mean when we say they're tapped in, tuned in?
Yeah, the sacred word is realizing that you're not, they already know.
Yes.
They already know. They have it figured out better than you. And it's allowing them to embody just who they are. And that's easier said than done. But I find as a parent, I go sit down. My daughter likes to cut things into little shapes and make things in color. So I sit down on the floor and then I just get curious about what she's doing. And I listen to her stories. And so the more we can make space for them to just be that which they are, and then get curious about that and ask silly questions and then ask and act silly with them. But it takes a certain amount of bandwidth to be able to do that. And that's where your self-healing and this healing work comes in, because if you haven't wrestled with your snakes, or in other words, you're wrestling with them every single day, but you haven't like quite figured out how to be with them, they're gonna come up and they're gonna be the yelling, the nagging, or however it shows up for you.
Those feelings of resistance, whatever they look like, right? The contrast.
When you're sitting down with your child, first of all, are you able to sit down with your child? Are you doing? And I'm guilty of this too. And then the other piece for parents these days is to forgive ourselves. It's a lot. It's a lot. And these kids are a lot too, you know. They're demanding of your time and energy in ways that we haven't been used to. So you forgive yourself and then you start again. The more I'm with my daughter, the more I'm realizing it's just the time is a gift. So coming back to that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the more that we expand upon any topic, the clearer it becomes and the more folks it'll resonate with. And I think this is going to resonate in a big way for so many. And I think it's hard. You know, I see the struggle. I'm a mom to 2 cats, so I don't have kids myself, although my kitten is of this quite tuned in realm, and she's something else. She's something else, but I observe it and I know that struggle is real, you know, that moms, they want to be so supportive, and then there's like the day-to-day that creeps in, like we have to get to school by a certain time, or we have to get to X, Y, and Z. And then it's sort of like the curiosity goes out the window a little bit and it becomes a process of
survival. So I keep coming, as you're talking, I keep coming back to the concept of self-healing, because I don't think we understand it quite as well, or we don't have many role models,
right,
who
yes,
have had self-heal, which is also again so important for us to be that for our kids.
we're
So the
pioneers,
self-healing,
right?
the self-healing I'm talking about is you update your vibration on a daily basis. It's like you come in with your mud covered rain boots, and then you wipe those boots on the front of the door, and then you go in. And yes, there might be some left there, but it's so important to keep wiping them off. Does that make sense? Or keep flossing your teeth. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
When you and there are certain things like crystals, like a warm bath filled with salts.
Mm-hmm.
And when you add your intention to the, like when you learn how to do that, when you add your intention to the crystals, that make it all the more bigger and more effective. So taking the time to learn those skills, that when you do that thing for 10 minutes, when you do that thing for 15 minutes, you get that little bit of relief, which then becomes the jump point for maybe one meaningful conversation with your kid, or one meaningful connection with your pet, or with your lover, or whoever is around you. So then it becomes that tender point that you can that you can always come back to. You won't be judged there, and you can bring everything to that point of wiping your feet on the floor, or even going outside, touching the earth, how it works. So I'm really interested in that these days, and I'm interested in empowering people with ways of doing that. So I'm working right now on a course on crystal healing. That's exactly that. And that's what I did. I got curious about crystals. I laid down on the floor with them until I felt something. So, but I want you to go there a little quicker than I did. So I want you to have some I don't know, guided meditation, some little ways of accessing that relief. Relief is the word I'm looking for.
Isn't that always the way with healers? We we go down the rabbit hole until we feel something, and then we hang out there.
Yeah.
But then we teach what it is that we had to learn.
Yeah, and then someone else comes along
Yeah.
to your door, and you're like, what just happened? What do I need to figure out now?
Definitely. So I love this. I want to go back here. I think it's super important for a number of reasons. You mentioned and you called it this tender point. The tender point you can always come back to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that key, right? It's that key that once we sort of reset, once we wipe the mud off of our boots, that's the tender point. We can feel it. We can feel ourselves. And it might only last for a split second, but as time goes, maybe we can hang there a little longer and we can learn, because that's our authenticity.
It's like forgiving yourself for going into the mud in the first place. Or even maybe the word forgiving is too much. Maybe opening up space for forgiveness to occur, for holding the pain of your parents and ancestors.
Yeah.
There's shame in that. I mean, it's unconscious shame, but there's shame. But it's just, I mean, you were doing the best you could with the tools you had. And now it's your responsibility to learn and update yourself with new tools so you do better. And the more the beautiful thing that comes out of this is it becomes over time, it becomes a beloved process of tending to yourself again and again. Yeah. But great point. Forgiving yourself over and over again. Forgiving yourself for not listening to your intuition, which is something I had to do, and I still do on a regular basis. Forgiving yourself for yelling at your kid, for not being your best. Forgiving yourself for marrying that person, whatever has happened to you. Forgiving yourself.
This is such a deep, deep conversation. I love the direction. There's so much here. And I hope that as folks listen, I hope that you take time to sort of reflect and allow this particular podcast to sort of sink in bits, so that you don't get overwhelmed, but rather you just spend time and it's like, okay, now I'm getting this. I'm getting this relationship with my parents. I'm getting this relationship with my kiddo. I'm getting it a little bit more. I'm getting it a little bit more. Oh, there's a meltdown. There's the snakes. Okay, I'm getting it again. Because that's what happens. That's life, and that's the patterns that we experience. You brought such light to what's going on for people and issues that we're all dealing with right now.
And I want to just say, I've been thinking about this. We as healers, and as people who are interested in healing ourselves or just in the general subject, we have this idea of vibrating high, ascending, increasing our light, which are all so beautiful and they're also part of it. But what part of me is like, let's just survive the day, let's just be with whatever is coming up to the surface from underneath the earth just this morning. Let me go through breakfast with some peace. And then lunch. So there's a lot of sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves of like going beyond to the extraordinary, of that beautiful, expanded, wholehearted living. But it doesn't always have to be over the top. It could just be that you've had a beautiful morning, that you paid attention to your surroundings and to your food, and that you were there.
The present moment.
Yeah, you were content with it. And when you have wounds, sometimes even that is a struggle.
Yeah.
So I want to bring it back to that, let's make the surviving the day-to-day a little easier by tending to our needs, so that we can go a little closer to thriving and make space for whoever is in our lives to thrive as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can't get overwhelmed with the expectation of ascension and evolution, right? We have to just realize we're in this physical body, we have this family, we have this role, whatever that role is, we have this other role, whatever that role is. And there's so much in the present moment. There's so much to gain from just letting the distractions fade away a bit and staying with something, because that's how we're going to enjoy the breakfast. That's how we're going to enjoy that conscious conversation with our kid. Yeah. That's how we're going to start it.
Yeah. By the way, if you try to be present to that, or try this exercise of sit down, close your eyes. If it's hard to meditate, there are things you need to tend to. It's as simple as that.
That's the simplest way I've ever heard that put. If it's hard to meditate, there's something to be tended to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we close today, let's just go deeper down into this. If it's hard to meditate, there's something to be tended to. How do we know what's there to be tended to?
Sometimes you need to know, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you could use a tool like tapping, which would normalize your experience. So you could be tapping and tending to your body as you accept and allow. So that would be a self-healing tool. And then you keep doing this, and then you find yourself that you stop doing this. So there's the resistance. Or you keep doing this and things aren't shifting as fast as you'd like, or in a way that you'd like. And that's when you should be like, okay, I need to figure out what snake is underneath this, and I need to figure it out now. And interestingly, that's when the synchronicities happen. Like I get people who come to me, they're like, I saw your postcard or your information like a year ago. I didn't think too much about it, but now like I know I need this. Or another person might come and they're like, I had 2 conversations with 2 other people, both of whom talked to me about you. And I'm like, yeah, maybe there's something here for you to deal with me. So listening to those clues. Or you might, be looking at your Facebook feed or looking at a little billboard in a cafe, and then something catches your eye. So then it becomes, follow the curiosity and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a pleasure. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to get in touch with you. So the easiest way through your website is probably the best, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So it's easier to spell than my Turkish name. It's a drop of ADROPOFOM.com. And Om to me represents that, that wholeness, that contentness, that okayness. So that's, having that little drops of Om accumulate in your life. So that's what that's about. I share, 2 or 3 times I share a newsletter with some musings around healing. So you could sign up to that. I have a resource on my website called 11 Questions to Determine Your Energetic Wounds. And those are all the wounds that I know of to date. If I know of more, I'll add them there. So that would be a good start to begin to understand what may be playing out in your inner space and how that might show up in your life. And then the other way to work with me is I always tell people you cannot know how chocolate tastes until you taste chocolate. I have a 30-minute free chakra call for whoever is interested. And through the call, one thing I haven't talked to so much about is that over the time, as I learned to trust my intuition more, I realized that I can sort of sense people vibrations. So that's what we do over the call is I sense into your field, and then we together figure out what wound is calling you to tend to. But yeah, I'd love to connect with your listeners. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you, Crystal. I feel like I want to have another tea with you. Sit down. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I love to talk with you.
Thank you for being with us today. This was such a pleasure and such an uplifting conversation.